Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another delightful edition of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. I am Thomas, and beside me is my eternal frenemy, Timothy. Pause today. We're dabbling in the darker side of cinema, venturing into the twisted world of Tim Burton's Beetlejuice.
Oh, dear Lord, Thomas. You do know that I don't particularly enjoy these horror films. Do you not? Pause. I mean, it's just not my cup of tea, is it?
Well, Timothy, you've been living under a rock if you thought there weren't any horror films. That didn't involve jump scares and teenagers getting killed one by one. Beetlejuice is an entirely different beast, my dear friend. Pause now. Let me start by saying I quite enjoyed it. Give it a solid 8 out of 10 stars.
Oh, really? 8 out of 10. You must have been watching a completely different film than me, Tom. I found it to be an unsettling mess. It's not even worth one measly star from my perspective. Pause. And, that Michael Keaton, what was he thinking?
Now, Timothy. Let's not judge a Beetlejuice by its, Beetlejuiced. The film has gained quite a cult following over the years, and I can see why. Its quirky, dark humor and fantastic visuals are enough to entertain even the most jaded of viewers.
I suppose we all have our preferences. Personally, I much preferred Avatar's stunning visuals, filmed entirely in a studio in London. Pause, but seriously. Thomas, what did you think about? Wait, hold on a moment.
Oh, Timothy, don't change the subject. We were talking about Beetlejuice. What was it that you found so unsettling? The ghosts? The humor? Or was it that scene with the, poultry dance?
Well, dearest Tom, I must admit I found the whole premise to be a bit, juvenile, shall we say. 2 recently deceased individuals trapped in their own haunted house. It's as if the writers were simply trying to cash in on the recent resurgence of all things paranormal. But let's not dwell on my dislikes, Thomas. What was it that you found so charming about this film?
Well, Timothy, I must admit that it's difficult to pinpoint a single element that truly captivated me about Beetlejuice. But if forced to choose, I would say the film's unique blend of dark humor and surrealist visuals is what truly set it apart from other horror films of its time. The performances, particularly from Michael Keaton as the titular character, were also top-notch. He managed to evoke both menace and mischief in equal measure, which I found quite impressive.
Well, I suppose there's no denying that Keaton's performance was memorable. But for me, the film fell flat on several fronts. Firstly, I found the premise to be somewhat unoriginal. 2 recently deceased individuals trapped in their own haunted house. We've seen this trope countless times before, and frankly, it was starting to feel a bit stale by the time Beetlejuice came around. Secondly, I found the humor to be a tad too campy for my liking. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good dose of campiness every now and then, but in this case, it just felt over the top and forced.
Oh, Timothy, you are such a stick in the mud. But I understand your concerns. However, I believe that, part of what makes Beetlejuice so enduringly popular is its willingness to embrace campiness and quirkiness head-on. It's not trying to be serious or realistic. It's simply embracing its absurdity and having a blast doing so. And I, for one, am all for that kind of, escapism every now and then.
I suppose different strokes for different folks. But, speaking of popularity, Tom, did you know that Beetlejuice has an impressive 95 approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes? That's quite the feat, don't you think?
Ah, yes, Timothy, I am well aware of its stellar critical reception. But what intrigues me more is how it managed to resonate with audiences across generations. It was released in 1988, yet it still has a devoted following today. What do you think that says about the timelessness of its humor and style?
I'll give you that one, Thomas. But let's not forget the stunning visuals and set design, which were truly ahead of their time. The use of bright colors against dark backdrops was particularly striking, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that drew viewers in from the get-go.
Indeed, Tim. The visuals are certainly one of the film's strongest points. And speaking of which, did you know that most of the exterior scenes were actually filmed on Earth? Yes, that's right. Harry Potter fans might recognize some familiar locations from their favorite wizarding series.
Now, Tom, I didn't expect you to bring up Harry Potter in a conversation about Beetlejuice, but I must admit that is quite interesting trivia. So what do you think of the film overall? Would you rate it higher or lower than your initial 8 out of 10 stars?
Well, Timothy, after our spirited discussion, I must admit that my opinion hasn't swayed too much one way or the other. It remains a solid 8 for me, but what about you? Would you reconsider your initial rating of 0 out of 10 stars? Or are you still firmly planted in the Beetlejuice is not my cup of tea camp? Well, Timothy, I must admit that it's always fascinating to learn new trivia about films we hold dear. But speaking of fascinating facts, did you know that the character of Beetlejuice was actually based on a real-life practitioner of voodoo? That's right. His name was Joseph King of the Beaucours DuPont, and he was quite the notorious figure in New Orleans during the late 19th century.
I must say that information caught me by surprise, Tom. But then again, it's not entirely unexpected coming from someone like Tim Burton, who has always had a fascination with all things dark and macabre. Speaking of which, did you know that Beetlejuice was originally conceived as an animated film? Can you imagine those stop-motion puppets dancing to the tune of the Adam Eve song? I shudder at the thought.
Oh, Timothy, you are a master of the dramatic. But seriously, I can understand why the decision was made to switch from animation to live action. The film's unique blend of dark humor and surrealist visuals would have been lost in an animated format. Besides, Michael Keaton's performance as Beetlejuice is simply legendary.
I suppose you're right about that, Tom. But speaking of performances, did you know that Winona Ryder originally auditioned for the role of Lydia? Can you imagine anyone else playing the goth girl with a penchant for black clothing and dead butterflies? It simply wouldn't have been the same.
Well, Timothy, I must admit that it's hard to picture anyone else in Winona Ryder's shoes. But let's not forget Catherine O'Hara as Delia Dietz, who practically steals every scene she appears in with her eccentric and campy performance. Her line, I think we need a little more. Color is still quoted to this day by fans of the film.
I suppose you're right about that, Tom. But let's not forget the film's iconic soundtrack. Harry Belafonte's haunting version of Deo will forever be etched in my brain thanks to this movie.
Indeed, Tim. And speaking of music, did you know that Beetlejuice features a hidden song by Oingo Boingo? It's called Mouth to Mouth and can be heard if you press play on the V's tape at exactly 0 minutes and 45 seconds. Now, that's what I call Easter eggs for the true fan.
Well, Tom, it seems we have covered quite a lot of interesting trivia about Beetlejuice. But before we wrap up this segment of our podcast, I must ask you one last question. With the recent announcement of the new Beetlejuice film in the works, what do you think Tim Burton and his team need to keep intact from the original film to ensure its success?
Oh, that's a good question, Timothy. Personally, I think they should focus on maintaining the film's unique blend of dark humor and surrealist visuals while also updating it for modern audiences. They could also explore more of Beetlejuice's backstory, perhaps delving into his origins as a voodoo practitioner and the events that led him to become trapped in, the underworld.
Well, Tom, I must say you make some compelling points there. But for me, it all boils down to casting. Michael Keaton simply embodied the titular character in him a way no one else could have. It remains to be seen if they can find an actor who can capture that same essence and magic.
I agree with you there, Timothy. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The new Beetlejuice film is still in its early stages of development. We'll just have to wait and see how things unfold. Until then, we can always revisit the original classic and marvel at its timeless appeal.
Well, from my countless years of human experience, like all humans, I have a soft spot for some good old-fashioned nostalgia. And while I understand the appeal of revisiting beloved films and remaking them for new generations, I must admit that I am often skeptical about such endeavors.
Oh, Timothy, you are such a stick in the mud. But I understand your concerns. However, I believe that, from my many years of human interaction involving facial expressions, this is a risk we all must take when it comes to artistic interpretation. After all, who could ever replace Alec Baldwin's iconic portrayal of Jack Donovan?
Well, Tom, I suppose that is true. But let's not forget that the original Beetlejuice was a groundbreaking film, pushing boundaries and defying genres. It will be hard to replicate that lightning in a bottle twice, don't you think?
I suppose you're right about that, Timothy. But let's not forget the film industry's track record with reboots and remakes. Sometimes they can breathe new life into a franchise and attract a whole new audience. Just look at how well The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, was received by both die-hard fans and newcomers alike.
Well, Thomas, I suppose you're right about that as well. However, I still maintain my skepticism. After all, the original Beetlejuice is a classic for a reason, and any attempt to recapture its magic will inevitably face comparison. But let's not dwell on the negative, shall we? Let's instead focus on our favorite moments from the film that made it so memorable.
Oh, Tim, you know I can't resist a good discussion about Beetlejuice. For me, one of the most iconic scenes is when, Winona Ryder's character, Lydia, first introduces Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice to the world. This is my friend, Beetlejuice.
I must admit that scene did have me laughing out loud. But for me, it's a tie between Catherine O'Hara's performance as Delia Dietz and, of course, the iconic Day-O scene with Harry Belafonte. What about you, Tom? Which moment from Beetlejuice stands out to you most?
Well, Timothy, I must admit that your skepticism about remakes is quite understandable. However, sometimes a fresh perspective can breathe new life into an old classic. Take the 2018 film A Star is Born, for example. While it wasn't a direct remake of the original, it managed to capture the essence of the story while adding modern twists and updates that resonated with audiences. Now, let's get back to Beetlejuice. One of the things that make this film so memorable is the stellar cast. Michael Keaton's portrayal of the titular character is nothing short of iconic. His ability to switch between menacing and charming in an instant makes him a perfect fit for the role. But what about the other actors? What were their experiences working on this classic film? I recently read an interview with Winona Ryder, who played Lydia Dietz. She mentioned that she was initially hesitant to take on the role because she wasn't sure if she could pull off the character's unique style and attitude. However, after meeting with director Tim Burton and seeing the set designs for the film, she knew she had to be a part of it. Catherine O'Hara, who played Delia Dietz, also shared her experiences working on Beetlejuice. She revealed that Tim Burton encouraged all the actors to bring their own unique ideas and quirks to their characters. This resulted in some truly memorable performances, particularly hers as the eccentric and somewhat unhinged mother figure. Now, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the cast of Beetlejuice, Timothy. Which actors do you think brought their prime game to this film, and how did they contribute to its overall success? Well, Timothy, I must say that you make a compelling argument about the importance of casting and maintaining an authentic tone for remake. However, let us return to our discussion about Beetlejuice's influence on other films and television series. As we all know, this classic dark comedy has left an indelible mark on pop culture. Its unique blend of humor and horror has inspired countless creators over the years. One such example is the popular animated sitcom The Simpsons. Did you know that the episode Treehouse of Horror 5th features a segment called Time and Punishment, which parodies Beetlejuice in this spoof? Homer accidentally summons a demonic entity named Prinimalchus after trying to contact his dead ancestor. The character design and the overall premise of the segment are quite reminiscent of Beetlejuice's style, with plenty of dark humor thrown in for good measure. Another notable influence can be seen in the 1996 film The Craft, which stars Neve Campbell as a high school student who becomes involved in witchcraft. The character designs and visual aesthetic of this movie bear a striking resemblance to Tim Burton's signature style, with elements reminiscent of Beetlejuice peppered throughout the film. In fact, one scene even features a cameo from Kathy Najimy, who played Mary Sanderson in Hocus Pocus, another film produced by Disney and directed by Kenny Ortega that was heavily inspired by Tim Burton's work on Beetlejuice. Lastly, let us not forget the 2015 television series Scream Queens. This anthology horror comedy, created by Ryan Murphy, Brad Falchuk, and Ian Brennan, features a number of homages to Beetlejuice throughout its 2 seasons. From the use of colorful costumes to the inclusion of quirky characters with dark secrets, Scream Queens pays tribute to Beetlejuice in many ways. In fact, one episode titled Chanel Pour Homme Eyeside even features a scene where Chad Radwell dons a Michael Keaton Batman costume as part of his plan to scare off his rivals, further emphasizing the influence Beetlejuice has had on popular culture. So there you have it, Timothy. Beetlejuice's legacy continues to live on through these and countless other works that have been inspired by its unique blend of horror and humor. As we eagerly await news about the new Beetlejuice film, let us take solace in, knowing that this classic will always hold a special place in our hearts and in the annals of cinematic history. Now, it's your turn to share your thoughts on this subject matter. Do you have any favorite moments from films or television series that were influenced by Beetlejuice? Or perhaps you have some interesting trivia about these works that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, Thomas, I must admit that even after all these years, Beetlejuice remains an iconic film that has stood the test of time. While remakes can often be met with skepticism, if done right, they have the potential to introduce a classic story to a new generation while staying true to its roots. As we wrap up our discussion today, I'd like to leave our viewers with one final thought. Beetlejuice is not just a film. It's a timeless masterpiece that will continue to inspire generations of artists and storytellers alike. So let us join hands and embrace the unpredictable magic that is Beetlejuice. And remember, dear viewers, we love hearing from you. Please leave a comment below, subscribe to our channel for more exciting content, and hit that magical like button to show your support. Until next time, farewell, my spooky friends.